Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Campus Consortium's Edtalks webinar series on how Google Workspace for education, collaboration, and productivity tools provide economy, efficiency, security, and innovation. If you have any questions now or during today's presentation, please type them into the chat box or question pane in the Zoom control panel. We will begin in the next 2 minutes. Thank you everyone for joining us today. If you have any questions now or during today's presentation, please type them into the chat box or questions pane in the Zoom control panel. Without further ado, I would like to pass the platform to Dr. Carl Horvath, President at Campus Consortium. Over to you, Carl.
Thank you, Lily. Much appreciated. And welcome to everyone who's been here, who's attending today. We have great representation from the education community and other areas, but mostly a lot of higher ed, some K-12. And I can see that, we have a number of very interesting institutions that have attended that are interested in collaboration and productivity. And I'm just going to shout out to a few folks here who've signed up. Just so you know who is here, looks like we have Texas A&M University, Temple University, my old alma mater, and College of New Jersey. We have Carnegie Mellon. We have Pepperdine University. We have University of British Columbia. So hello to our Canada friends. And also Boston City University. We have the Northern Cape Department of Education. We have University of Wisconsin. We even have University from Saudi Arabia attending today, and welcome to everyone who has signed up and attended. So a very diverse attendance from across the US and even outside of the US. So and all kinds of different institutions, public, private, systems, research universities. So welcome to all, and we have a great panel and great discussion today. I am Carl Horvath. I'm the president of Campus Consortium, and tell you a little bit about Campus. It's a woman and minority founded collaborative technology association, national. It's been serving nonprofit organization, institutions, and communities to help communities overcome financial expertise and resource challenges associated with technology. And of course, especially since the pandemic, everyone is relying on technology much more. Here's just a few of the services that we offer, and we would invite you to become a member of Campus Consortium and or at least find out more of what we can offer you. And we'd love to hear from you and talk with you. Special thanks to our guest education institutions today, Lewis and Clarke College and the College of St. Scholastica. And also special thanks to our sponsors today, Google for Education and CDW Amplified Services for Education. Today's Edtalk is about Google Workspace for Education, collaboration and productivity, and what they can do for your institution or organization. Going to start out with a poll question, and we really like to engage the audience and have you participate because we want to hear from you as well. Our panelists can respond to your questions, so please enter them into the Q&A panel or the chat. We will respond. If we don't get to your questions today, we'll certainly follow up and send it out to you after the webinar. Today's first poll question: do you use online collaboration and productivity tools for teaching, learning, and services? Services could be student services or even faculty staff services. No, not really, but we want to, is the first answer. Somewhat, we continue to implement more is the second answer. And then the third is yes, we use online tools for teaching, learning, and services on and off campuses. And many institutions have done this, especially in emergency mode around the time of the pandemic. They are keeping some of their remote resources for teaching, learning, and services. We'd like to hear from you if what your stance is as far as collaboration and productivity tools. I'd like to start out with just a few definitions. Online education tools can mean services, but it can also mean teaching and learning. What we're looking at today specifically is Google Workspace for Education. What those are apps, programs, platforms that integrate with your environment. And we can, make sure that they blend seamlessly with your environment to provide that online experience for your students, staff, and faculty that's usable and much more efficient than perhaps manual processes that were used in the past. And the good thing about using collaboration and productivity tools is that you can address compliance, privacy, and security issues by using them, and protect your populations by implementing them, but also improve your workflows and work processes. And of course, IT support and cloud storage is part of this. Years ago, back in the 90s, as CIOs, we would have in-house on-premise systems. Today, for education, cloud services, systems, environments are much more affordable and accessible, and definitely helps with the issue with obtaining expertise in IT and other areas as far as providing services in the cloud for teachers, for students, faculty, and staff. And so, really the essence of what these tools do is create a social element that may have not been there before. If we have some campuses that have been focused solely on on-ground experience, we know that the demographic of students today are very social, media-oriented, and technology-oriented in terms of their social interactions, and also their retail, health, and banking engagements. And so, definitely as an academic institution, we want to pivot to these preferences from students and make them feel like they're part of a virtual community, not just in their transactions or their administrative work that they have to do with your campus, but also with teaching and learning and rethinking, which should be able to empower faculty to really connect with students more effectively in some ways than they have before. And so students can share and really exponentially change their ability to build knowledge in the long run. So, some of the issues are not just that student faculty experience, but also administrating it and bringing it into your environment. What are the benefits for an institution? And so your systems have to have high availability. They need to be easy to manage. Of course, security and privacy have to be concerns, controls and compliance. I just remember all the management letters we would get from our auditors every year, that we would have to ensure that we had controls in place for certain types of information and data. Economical cloud storage is also a consideration. And really, it brings teaching and learning into the 21st century. All right, so I'm just going to pivot to our next poll question before we introduce our first panelist. Multiple disparate systems with no central access. So identify your institution's collaborative productivity, tools, and security challenges. You have multiple systems, you have tools that have potential but lack of training and usability, concern over privacy, storage space, inefficient systems. Just choose all that can apply, and you should be able to see this poll on your screen, and you can select from that. I'm going to start to introduce our first panelist, who will talk a little bit about what she is doing on her campus in terms of collaboration and productivity tools. Meredith Goddard is the Director of Enterprise Applications and an adjunct professor of innovation at Lewis and Clarke College. In her IT role, she leads technology and governance for campus-wide software applications and application administrators, oversees software solution evaluations and proposals, and acts as the lead administrator for Google, among other responsibilities. She's also an educational entrepreneur and is most passionate about preparing young people for the future of work, and it's written widely about the future of work and new models for work-based learning. She was a high school teacher for 10 years and currently teaches workshops and classes on personal finance, the fourth industrial revolution, innovation, personal branding, and the gig economy. She holds a BA from Carleton College and a master's degree from Duke University. Meredith is also an avid reader, block party organizer, distance runner, mom and partner, chocolate lab lover, and dreamer and doer, feminist and futurist. Meredith, it's great to have you here today. I don't know how you have time to fit life in with all that you do, but it's amazing. And I'd like to hand the platform over to you.
Well, I really appreciate that. And it's great to be here. And I would say, first of all, Lewis and Clarke hasn't figured it out. Like, we're still in progress and it's still in process and working on Google and this amazing kind of collaboration tool in space. I don't know if you want to switch to the slide with my talking points, because it will give all of you kind of a quick overview of what I want to share just from my my enterprise applications role in IT. First of all, like I said, our Google maturation journey is still in progress. And I really don't know anyone, and I've been on a number of webinars, calls with higher ed leaders in Google, who feels like they're there in terms of managing Google well, because it's such an enormous platform, right? I think most schools, probably many of you included, signed up for Google for its free email services, right? And it's ballooned from there. And it's been, wonderful in the sense that we've gotten access to everything from YouTube for video storage to Google Colab for teaching computer science and writing Python, executable Python scripts to, Google Vault is a great resource for our ISO and general counsels with their e-discovery tools. But you and I, we both know that we didn't necessarily sign up for this, and this is what we've gotten. And so I started my role about 3 years ago. And one of my first tasks was to figure out how to strategically administrate Google. And I'm still on that journey. So let me just share a little bit about what we've done. If it's helpful for any of you, I'm really happy to hear it. So we started out with just an audit, and we did an audit with a consultant, and we continue to do audits. We did an audit 3 years ago, but I recommend an audit every year, where you just go through your Google admin panel and you see what features are turned on, what are turned off, what are best practices for security and compliance with cyber insurance rules, best practices for teaching and learning, best practices that are in line with standards of other colleges. And so we started with a Google audit to figure out what was on or off, turn things off that we didn't realize were on that shouldn't have been on, and then really try to create processes, governance, if you will, for how to turn features on in the future, so that it wasn't just kind of this ungoverned Wild West kind of space. So we started with an audit. I highly recommend that, and I recommend an annual audit. One of the other things that we have been doing and working on in our maturation journey is figuring out Google Groups. So again, we started with Google as an email tool, but groups are wonderful, but they can serve lots of different purposes, right? We have our student information system automatically creating groups, right, for each professor to email their students. We have requests for groups from various constituencies. We have a bulletin that's like not quite, it's not like our emergency notification system, but we have an LC bulletin that uses Google Groups that sends out when there are campus events that happen that everyone needs to know about. We have Google Groups that are kind of listservs across colleges. We have these wonderful computer science professors that run, data analytics Google Groups listservs where people can join in. And so our groups audit was about cleaning up these thousands and thousands of lists that some of them are, unused for years, and making sure that that was up to date and maybe not as much of a risk, because when you have all these groups, they can be a risk with phishing and ransomware and that kind of thing. We also did an analysis of our applications we had allowed in the past and created a procedure for allow listing applications in the future that were connected to Google. That's a strength of Google, is that they, you can have all these wonderful add-ons to make sheets and docs and slides and Google Classroom more functional. But I wouldn't recommend just allowing anything into your ecosystem. And so you do need to come up with a process for governance there. We did an analysis of shared drives, because to be honest, it was very, very difficult to convince my CIO to turn on shared drives, which if you all don't know, I do recommend it with some caveats, because there is limited storage now in the current Google environment. But shared drives, I believe they prevent data loss, institutional data loss, when there's employee turnover or students leave. Shared drives are especially important for grant-funded research at universities, because you really can't lose any of that data. And but we had to figure out, we had to convince our CIO to adopt shared drives, and he had very valid reasons to be skeptical. And those reasons included, governance, and we're still figuring that out. And Google is still working on tools to give administrators better visibility, reporting, and management of shared drives. But it's a new space, and we're still working on it. To be honest, we are planning on rolling out shared drives. We did a soft launch 2 years ago. We're planning on rolling out shared drives to each department, and allocating a certain amount of storage to each department with shared drives. YouTube, how to request access to YouTube, whether to give YouTube functionality to all students. We haven't, we probably won't, but that's an ongoing issue. One of the interesting challenges we tackled recently is provisioning kind of alphanumeric email addresses in Google for all new students, faculty, staff at Lewis and Clarke, and then allowing them to create their own aliases. And we've done that because we realized that it was too hard to change, usernames across all the systems. And so Google does allow for that, which is really helpful, because we have, people that are changing their names for a whole host of reasons, and we want to honor those name changes. And we couldn't previously. Google, with their aliases now, allows us to honor those name change requests. All right, so I'll kind of stop and say that the Google maturation journey is ongoing. We are now considering, and this is part of my challenges and opportunities, but we are now going through admin roles, and we're really thinking about Google. It's not a one-person job. Like, there should just be someone that's in charge of all the strategy and the big picture here. But we think of Google in terms of having kind of product owners by team, right? So our infrastructure team owns some products within Google. Our Edtech team probably deals with Google Classroom. Our information systems team deals with any kind of things related to account provisioning or account management, right? And so that's how we're viewing administration, but certainly you can administrate by admin functionality as well. And Google has pre-built roles for administration that you can kind of divvy up amongst your team members. Real quick, I want to talk about why Google Plus. We just subscribed to Google Plus last year. And there's a number of reasons we chose to do this. One, we really wanted to see what was possible with the new security features, and I'll let another panelist do a deep dive into those security features because that's not my area of expertise. But we found the security investigation tool to be particularly invaluable, especially as we're doing account cleanups now, because we now have a limited storage space. All EDU institutions are given 100 terabytes, and then more than that, depending on your size. We're a small liberal arts school, so we have 100 terabytes to work with. Well, we needed to do account cleanup, right? We were suspending accounts because we could. We had to start deleting accounts. Well, we had plenty of people asking, where's this document? I need to change ownership of this document. And so the security investigation tool is not just helpful for, quarantining phishing emails. It's really helpful for finding documents and slideshows and things and, data that people are maybe worried that they're going to lose access to, and changing owners too in this era when we're deleting accounts. Another reason why we chose, so beyond the security tools, and I'll have Walt talk about that. Another reason why we chose Plus is that Google Meet's rivaling Zoom in their functionality. They have polls, they have hand raise features, they have, the breakout room feature as well. I still don't think people look as good on Google as they do in Zoom, but that's coming. I was just debating with my IT governance committee whether we turn on Zoom's face enhance feature or something like that. Google doesn't have that yet, but maybe soon enough. But they rival in terms of abilities, and the big hurdle is training faculty who have a certain level of exhaustion at this point, especially talk exhaustion, on a new platform, a new video conferencing platform when they've all bought into Zoom. But I've tested Zoom with my classes, or sorry, Google Meet with my classes, and it is actually much more user friendly. I feel less buttons, less clicking than Zoom. Another thing is we really wanted the extra time for, storage enforcement was happening for Google this summer. We all have a limited storage environment. We wanted a little bit more time to figure out how we're going to get under that 100 terabytes we are now, and to see what tools Google was rolling out to actually allow us to enforce storage quotas. And so we felt good about that. We just bought 1 year. Some schools bought many years and they have a couple of years to figure it out. We're almost there. But what I would say, I guess this is tangential, but what I would say is all EDU institutions are now dealing with this limited storage environment. One of the things I love about being a Google institution is that there's a lot of people that are willing to share what they've learned, what they're doing, best practices. So for all of you, I'm sure you're subscribing to the Google Updates blog, but also the EDUCAUSE Google listserv, which I know Carly on this call is one of the moderators on, is super helpful. And the Internet 2 group is very, very helpful. And we are actually not even an Internet 2 member, but Internet 2 has been very gracious to give us, Google discounts and allowed us to be part of these Internet 2 conversations around Google. So there's a really robust community that is very willing to share best practices. So that's another reason for Google, and in figuring things out in Google+. Google+ also comes with additional storage, and that's pretty useful for us as we're deploying departmental shared drives. We'll take that additional storage and use it for departmental shared drives. Some challenges, and it's no different than like Microsoft, if that was your tool. And I think that Google is easier to manage than Microsoft. It's just the user experience and interface is a lot simpler. But it's hard to keep up with changes. There's like no notification bell at the top of your admin page that says this is what's changed. You have to figure that out. And so that's why we do these annual audits. Feature requests can take years. And there are some real feature requests that we really do need. Things like, what's one of the things that we need? We need better ability to control Google Photos, which was turned on and is a storage liabilities. We can't delete photos as an admin. I don't know when that feature is going to be released, so that can be quite frustrating. An ounce of prevention is probably worth a pound of cure, but you don't really know what those preventative measures are until usually later, because we don't have 20/20 vision. We don't have that kind of foresight. So for example, I wish we had set up an organizational unit structure where it was staff, faculty, students. We didn't. And so now going back and creating that structure with our Microsoft AD identity management system is quite difficult. Not everyone has GAM training or this specific Google kind of coding training. In fact, one person on our staff does, and GAM allows you to do a lot within the Google system. But that training is at a premium and it's scarce. So we wish we had more people that were trained on GAM. And we wish we right now had a la carte storage purchasing options so that we could purchase more storage for those departmental shared drives, like communications that really do need more storage. Some opportunities for the future, I would say the Security Center is robust and it's a focus of Google's, and it's really great. It's very helpful. And I imagine that actually our cyber insurance will require a lot of the Security Center tools going forward. So that in and of itself is worth the investment. Google Chat is great, and it's an unexplored and underused area. I'm curious about all of you and how you use Google Chat, but we use Google Chat in IT as our virtual coffee space. We use it team by team in IT. We use it for updates. It hasn't been deployed to classrooms. It isn't used campus-wide. It does rival Slack in a lot of ways, and it's really functional and helps build community. And so I do think, students are not checking email. What about chat? That's an opportunity in the future, and it's a cool space. We haven't really done enough with Vault, this e-discovery tool. We haven't done enough with DLP rules and protecting, sensitive PII. We're going to, and that's an opportunity in the future because the tools are really great. We also don't use Classroom as our LMS of choice. We use Moodle still, but I can imagine that changing if we continue to be a Plus subscriber because of the roster syncing tools, because the originality reports rival Turnitin.com, and it's pretty expensive software. It's really functional. And then the opportunities are just to also improve our administration of this tool and let students and staff and faculty know what's available in Google. All right, I'll stop there. I've talked a lot.
Meredith, that was amazing. That was great information. And I think very useful. While you were speaking, we did get a couple questions I wanted to address. Before we get to those questions from the audience, I just wanted to share the results of our polls. Poll 1 was, do you use an online collaboration and productivity tool for teaching, learning, and services? And out of all the responses, 75% said yes, 20% said somewhat, and 5% said not really. So it looks like most institutions are actively working with productivity and collaboration tools. So that is good, and it really signals a change for how teaching and learning and other activities are conducted at educational institutions. In poll 2, we had a question about identify your institution's digital collaboration productivity tools and security challenges. Select all that apply. And out of all of these, the most responses were concerned over privacy, user information, and sensitive data. Second was tools have potential, but lack of training, usability, and expertise. And third was, another one was inefficient systems, burdensome maintenance. And then after that, multiple systems and storage space. So, certainly everyone is dealing with some of the issues that you addressed today, Meredith. And Tom, also, if you could speak to this just very briefly before we move over to Walt. We did get a question, or if you want to comment on any of the poll results, but we did get a question about there was Joe Gasper was interested in more details on how you divided up Google Apps among various campus groups.
Yeah, for sure. We do a lot of work with different educational institutions and talk a lot about different personas and different job roles within those institutions. Meredith did a really great job at mentioning that, where we've seen in the past where one person has to, shoulder the entire Google ecosystem, and it's too much. Even if you're a small institution, a small K-12 school, there's way too much going on and way too many settings and pieces to monitor. So similar to what Meredith said, we really encourage and try to coach educational institutions into, splitting up security pieces or going to a network security enterprise team, and provisioning and user creation, like she said, is a common one. There's sometimes communications officers that are going to be in charge of monitoring those Google groups, making sure and ensuring that the right people are in those groups. So yeah, the list goes on and on. There's a lot of different ways you could slice that up and delegate responsibility to different groups within your institution.
I just want to quickly interject, and because we see this a lot in higher education, is you have your email department, right, or your exchange department, and so you create a custom Google role within the admin console so that you give the right permissions to that group. And the same for if your InfoSec need information, you create a custom role for security, or even just the investigation tool, right? You can create a custom role so they have just the access they need to the investigation tool. And this will help institutions kind of do that group for each section of their administration. So your InfoSec, your IDM team, maybe your email team, your communications team, all have these custom roles in the admin console.
Great information. And I apologize. I really didn't introduce Tom and Carly yet because we didn't get to them in the lineup, but I think they have so much valuable input as we move along with our education institution. So every month for Campus Consortium Edtalk, we always have representation from the education community. Typically, these are leaders in the education community to talk about the challenges they have and solutions that they've come up with to share with the rest of our education community, both as members of campus and outside. Today, we have Carly Walker, who previously was a education staff member and would provide IT support for education institutions. So she worked with educational institutions as a integrator, as a structural designer, as a technologist, and she now is an education consultant for CDW Amplified. And so she has a lot of experience, both personally and having worked with many institutions. So Carly just gave us some good input and insight. And then Tom Woods is really a Google expert. And so he is here to talk about Google Workspace for Education and really knows any questions that you might have. So I would say to the community attending today, if you have any questions, definitely ask them today. And if not, follow up afterwards with us and we'll make you, we'll get you connected with Tom and Carly. So that was good feedback on that. I just wanted to say one more comment from our attendees that one person had, was just a bit curious about the Google Chat versus Slack rivalry. Meredith, they seem to think their experience has been somewhat opposite that, but certainly it must be taking care of your needs in terms of that. Plus, it's included with Google Workspace, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. And it might be even included in the very basic free version of Google Workspace. Right.
So that's, first of all, it there's advantages to centralizing your applications and systems so they don't have multiple systems to manage. And I guess it depends on what you need out of a chat. Interesting to hear that. And of course, it's always economy that we're concerned about in education. All right, we have a couple more questions that we will certainly get to. I appreciate, and our panelists are responding to some of these questions, so thank you for doing that. And I'm going to move on now to our next poll question. And how can online collaboration and productivity tools help with compliance and IT security? And again, this is another select all that apply for you questions. Role-based authentication, protect and secure, sensitive data, controls for compliance, track user activity, scan email attachments. And Meredith did, speak to some of these compliance and control concerns. And I alluded to some of that in the beginning with the annual audit. As CIO, I would have to, ensure we attended to the list of items from the auditor, including controls of access to sensitive data and also around privacy. So these are all certainly concerns. And in a previous poll question, we talked about some institutions having multiple systems across their institution in different forms of manual processes and otherwise. So something like one system that pulls everything together and protects your data is certainly useful. So if you could answer this question, we'll share the results in just a moment. And I'd like to move on to our next speaker, Walt Swanson. Walt Swanson is the Director of Information Security at the College of St. Scholastica and an experienced technology and information security leader who developed strategies that influence behavior, enhance a positive culture, increase employee engagement, and protect corporate reputation. He is adept at understanding the drivers that impact organizational success in a variety of industries. So he's had experience in retail, financial services, banking, law enforcement, and education. And Walt managed numerous large-scale projects, including construction of new facilities, implementation of security information and event management solutions, and managed technology and operations budgets of over $6 million. He holds a BS and an MBA in business administration and management. Walt, that sounds like a lot of responsibility, and would love to hear from you on the security aspect of collaboration and productivity tools. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thanks, Carl. Hope everybody can hear me. And if I start coughing, I might mute my mic for a little bit, but that's just the way it is. If somebody could go to the next slide so we could see, let everybody see. So, you know, it's going to be hard for me to follow up Meredith's great thing that she did and talking about everything. We're at the College of St. Scholastica, we're a little bit different. We're at the point where we're making the decision of moving to Google Plus, the workstation or Workspace Plus. And some of the reasons for doing it is we had, just like everybody else has had, we had to clean up all the data that we had out there and go through it from, you know, over a decade of, hey, free space, use it, do whatever you want with it. And that was really a bad thing. So when I started here, we were just in the point of doing that, and it got thrown into my lap with some of the projects that I had worked with in the past. The CIO knew me and knew what I was capable of. So immediately I got thrown on this, cleaned it up. We cleaned up a variety of things. I want to say that with Carly's team, her team helped us out, and I can't say enough about the help that I got from her team to get that done. We cleaned everything up. We got under our 100 terabytes of space that we needed. We got down, I think we're down in just about to the 70s now. So we're really good. And you may not think that's a lot, but we started in the petabytes range. So it was huge for us to do that. And one of the things that I liked about this is the extra storage and using how we could use that. It also, this was allowed me to set up a bunch of policies and criteria from all the way from alumni to staff, faculty, and students to try to, you know, come up with a workable plan with what we're going to get with storage. Also figuring out, okay, so if we added this and went to this, what that would mean for us. So that was huge for us. And one of the big things about going to here was, you know, originally we were like, well, you're going to have to keep all the space. But it was, I saw it as an opportunity to utilize that space, set requirements, which were never done before, by the way, and clean that up and make this into a sustainable environment. Because right the way we had it, and Carly might agree with me here, and hopefully she will, we didn't have a sustainable environment the way it was. It was kind of the Wild West tenfold. So we got that. One of the other things that was really made me look at this is the dashboards that you got with this, or that I'm going to get with this, and the health pages that you get with this, helping people that don't understand the security too much make the right decisions. Because so many times we have people without any security background trying to make decisions, trying to do things, trying to check the right boxes. You know, is this the right setting? Is that the right setting? And they don't really know. And it's not anyone's fault, because a lot of people get brought up through the organization. You can't really budget for all the training that someone would need to make an understanding of what is this requirement and what is that requirement, and the changing that we're going to have this year. Because I know a lot of us are going to see a change in December that we're going to have to deal with. So those two things are really, really important. And the tools such as the investigations and things, the example that I really want to talk about is I'm figuring that I'm going to save 2 to 4 hours per week with my staff on what I'm going to have the ability to do here. So I'm thinking 2 to 4 hours every week. I'm going to shave off the workload of my people to look at things and do things just because they can do them so much easier. Also, the fact that this system is set up the way you can do it by looking at it was I can make good decisions for people at a really high level, and then only have that done. The other thing is we all deal with is you can't be a prophet in your own town, right? So you have to use the system to kind of say, well, this is the right thing and this is what we should be doing. It's a lot easier when it's highlighted to this that I can show, okay, look at this. This is going to be the right decision versus me trying to explain, years of security background to somebody that doesn't understand it and saying why this is the right decision. I mean, I constantly get people that view regulations or requirements and they're completely wrong. They don't understand what they really mean. They're just like, well, we'd have to do this. And I'm like, so where did you hear that? Because you need to read this again to see really what it says. And I think those two things there are going to help people understand what they really mean and what you have to do. And as Meredith said, this is going to be important for insurance because we're going to see things, for those of you that went through an insurance meeting here not too long ago, probably to say what's the changes are, you can tell it's getting harder and harder to meet all these guidelines and the costs are going up. And pretty quick, it's going to be, you need certain tools such as like this that can prove I'm doing the right things, because otherwise you're not going to be able to keep insurance. I have a feeling. I just see, in the past 15 years from what we had 15 years ago to now, it's completely night and day. And this kind of takes off the world about, what kind of security people you have in there. One of the things that didn't say on a bio is I maintain a CISM and I also maintain a CISSP, and I have for about 15 years with both of those. So they're important things. The investigation tools, I can't say enough about them, making it easy. But the real benefit to me was the reduction of workload in my people was tremendous. And the ability to make the right decision because the tool helps you make it. And the ability to take that and basically say, here's the right thing. You go into, for those of you that have done this in a Microsoft environment, you really need to know that stuff. And it doesn't tell you the right choice. So you have to kind of understand what the right choice is. This is a lot simpler and basically leading you to the right choice and basically being able to justify the right choice with, the cabinet that you have to deal with, president's cabinet, boards you have to deal with, that sort of thing. I guess that's all I have. So thank you.
All right, Walt, that was great. Thank you so much for that overview. And you're absolutely right. I recall dealing with cyber insurance issues when I was a CIO, but afterwards, in the past year or so, I've talked to so many schools that are now encountering new issues with cyber security insurance, and the rules are changing. So you really do have to have these controls and systems in place. And now we have to worry more about compliance than we ever did before. So that was good feedback. And in fact, poll question 3 asked the question, how can online collaboration and productivity tools help with IT security? And looks like that 79% of the responses said that they want to track user activity, audit tools, and identify threats. And also everything else. All the other ones were very high responses, but mostly all of them, evenly 64%, role-based authentication, protect and secure sensitive data, controls for compliance and regulation, scan email attachments. So when you say, Walt, about the efficiency savings, hours per week, identifying threats maybe automatically instead of manually kind of looking for them, totally makes sense. All right, another poll question here before we move on. Identify features of online collaboration and productivity tools that improve user experience and create efficiencies by reducing technology maintenance and support. So this is, can we look at collaboration and productivity tools as a way to create efficiencies? I think Walt alluded to this, especially in terms of the security, but maybe in other support areas like academic, technology, or IT. Again, select all that apply, cloud-based system, centralized data documents, 24/7 availability and remote access, manage groups and teams, and project management and reporting. If you could take the next 30 seconds to answer this, audience, please do. And we will move on to Carly Walker. We talked a little bit earlier about Carly and her previous experience. And we are now looking at, we're going to fit in Carly and Tom within the next 10 minutes or so to make sure we keep to our time. But Carly Walker served the education sector over 10 years, including K-12 schools and higher education institutions, such as the University of Texas Health System. She's an experienced e-learning specialist with a demonstrated history of empowering faculty and enriching students through education technology. She has expertise in learning management systems, Google Workspace, Microsoft 365, education technology, institutional or instructional technology, course building, instructional design, e-learning, and project management. In addition to online and cloud application expertise, Carly is skilled at development, implementation, and innovation, including technology integration, transformational ed tech training, assessments, and advising. Carly holds an MS from Nova Southeast University and is a higher education consultant for CDW Amplified. Carly, thanks for joining today and offering that insight earlier. I want to hand it over to you.
If you can go to the next slide, that would be great. So I want to talk to you as somebody who comes from the higher ed industry, right? I was actually a customer, just like Meredith and Walt, before I moved over to the other side of CDW Education, Amplified Services. And we started with enterprise. We were Google customers for a really long time. We went with enterprise because of the security reasons and because the University of Texas Health Science Center we had a BAA with Google and we stored PHI and we needed a better way to monitor it. As I moved over to the other side with Tom, as we provide our audits and as we provide our services to Meredith and Walt, I just wanted to say that, from the end user experience, I think for Google and for your students, and because we haven't really talked about that at all, I don't want higher ed institutions to forget that your students from K through 12 are coming up knowing Google. They know Gmail, that's what they're using, and that's what they're comfortable with. So as they move forward in their education experience, continuing with something that they're comfortable with, knowing how to collaborate and already use the tools makes for a seamless education journey for your students, right? They already know it, they're comfortable with it, and they can continue using it. And I 100% agree with both Walt and Meredith in the fact that, a lot of institutions just took Google and ran with it and then realized, wow, there's so much out there. How do I manage it all? And we're really lucky that Google does provide us with those, updates. I want to say they're almost daily, right? But there is a lot to manage and it isn't just for one person. And being able to, Google gives us the tools to better manage that, right? We can create custom roles so we can set something up in groups. We can create different groups so we have group email addresses. We can create spaces in chat like Slack. And there's just so much out there that we can use. And I want to kind of touch on Walt, but I also want to leave time for Tom to talk also, is the empowerment of using the investigation tool. I don't know if any of you are familiar with GAM, but I was never comfortable with it. I always felt like I was going to break something and I wasn't an expert. The investigation tool kind of gives you that look of things, right? I can search almost anything. I can create an activity rule in there to alert me of something going on. I can customize my dashboards that I'm able to just see what I need to look at. So if you have those custom roles or you have multiple super admin looking at something, they're looking at what they identify as important, right, for them. And it does. It cuts down on the time that it takes to deal with these situations. I can go into the investigation tool. If I've had somebody send out a malicious email, I can go in and within 10 minutes, delete it from everybody's inbox. It's gone. And I think that's just an important point to the security, like how Google has increased their security so much, right? We've gone from having nothing to having the capability at our hands to really take action right away. And I think that's really important. And to touch upon Meredith, because of the audit that we did with her, I think it's such a valuable tool to go in and really take a look at what you're doing, because before, as you set up Google, you're kind of just turning it on, right? And letting it go. And then really taking a closer deep dive into that. What does it look like? What's on? What is Google turned on by default that I didn't realize Google turned on by default, and now I need to turn off? And really going through that change management methodology of what's on, how long is it going to take, how does it affect my end users, is definitely something that institutions really should do, because that we're all about, higher ed institutions are all about process and change management and governance. And I think the audit helps with that as well. I'm going to let Tom take it over.
Thank you, Carly. That's great, and I love the perspective from your experience in education, as well as how you're seeing many more institutions and how they're working with that. I'm going to read off the last poll question very quickly. First thing I must do, that I missed doing in the beginning, was giving a hello to Michelle Vaudrin from the University of British Columbia. Hello from Canada. Hello from US. Great to see you. Last poll question, everyone, please participate on this one. Identify how online campus collaboration and productivity tools transform teaching and learning. Again, select all that apply, empower faculty, engage students, add rich media, dynamic content, access and submit content, communicate effectively, and integrate with LMS. And our final speaker, we saved the best for last, Tom Woods. Tom, I'm sorry, you have only about 5 minutes, but I'm sure it'll be action-packed. And I'll just quickly, I did refer to you as an expert in Google Workspace for Education, and I know that I've known you for over a year, and you certainly always come up with the right and appropriate answer, and it's finding the right fit and solution for institutions. If it's right for the institution, then you can make it happen. So I would like to, I want to read through your bio, but since we have limited time, I just want to hand it right over to you so you can get through what you need to talk about.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. And hello, everyone. I'm in Canada as well. So hello to the folks in BC and I think Montreal that we saw in the chat that are joining us. And yeah, working in educational technology for over 20 years now. And working with Amplified IT, formerly now CDW Amplified for Education, we're always about finding out what's best for that educational institution, like Carl mentioned, and that's first and foremost at the front of all of our consultancy services and the work that we do and our audit, like Carly mentioned. So yeah, next slide, Carl, would be great, and we'll keep our eye on the time for everybody. Google Workspace for Education, and you can go to google.com/edu privacy and see all this information for yourself, which I'm sure a lot of you have, or you're maybe already on the fundamentals product with Google for Education, but meeting all those standards that you'd expect, FERPA, COPA, everything in between around PII information and things like that are there. And there's pages and pages of information on that for you to do your due diligence on that. And a lot of folks have already done that. Next slide. The way the landscape sits right now, Carly mentioned Enterprise for Education. That was kind of Google's first swing at a paid tier years ago. A lot of the feedback they received was, that was great, but it was kind of a one size fits all, which doesn't necessarily fit all for everyone well. So Google last year has taken that feedback and come out with some various paid editions to break things up and give you, the educational institution, the choice for what's going to work best for you. Obviously, Fundamentals is out there. That's still the free version. That's not going to change. Google is going to continue to innovate and add new features and services to that free version. This isn't any writing on the wall or indication that Google is going to stop having a free tier, and they're very adamant about that. But for the folks that see that value, that need these tools, and I think what we're really hearing today is probably 100% of the folks in higher education probably do need these additional tools that we're discussing today when it comes to security and things like that. Then there's these paid editions there for you. I think what we'll focus on for sure is Workspace for Education Standard is all the security tools. So if that is your sole focus, That is the investigation tool. That is the security center. A lot of the other things that we've been mentioning today are included in that when it comes to the back-end security for your users, staff, faculty, and students that are using the system. The Workspace for Education Plus with the star on the right is definitely the best option for higher ed institutions and the one that we see most going with. It does also bundle in the teaching and learning upgrade, which is going to give you the instructional and collaboration tools like the enhanced Google Meet features of polls and breakout rooms and things like that we discussed. You're going to get the replacements for something like Turnitin with Google Classroom to do searches online for plagiarism and actually do student-to-student searches internally for missed citations and plagiarism and things like that. So all those features are going to come with that teaching and learning bundle, but with Plus, you get everything across the board. So that's definitely the most popular version that we see, and that we're definitely, in most cases, recommending most higher ed institutions go with. Next slide, please. Really quick highlight of some of the key features that higher ed has definitely been interested in, and the things that seem to push people over the line for making the move to Plus or one of the paid editions. Data regions is a really important choice where, normally in a cloud environment, whether it's Google or Microsoft or AWS, things can be dispersed globally across data centers and triplicated and redundancy in a lot of different ways. Data regions allows you to make sure your data as an institution is going to be kept solely within US data center servers for Google. So that's a choice with Standard and Plus that you can then choose for any or all of your users, staff, faculty, students, etc. Dynamic groups is really interesting. It seems simple. It's a lot of new abilities to have those Google groups. Meredith mentioned them for great communication and things like that across the institution. Have them be, have the membership maintained automatically given some sort of criteria. That could be organizational unit location for those users. It could be an attribute, and there's a lot of those in Google. That could be a geolocation. That could be a lot of things. Where I really want to tie that in an interesting story is we've worked with a couple institutions already. Like we said, insurance from K to 25 is a big problem right now for educational institutions. Everyone's under the gun a little bit there. Two-step verification being mandatory for staff is the one we hear the most. All staff, instructors, teachers, everyone in between. We've worked with some institutions where we've taken dynamic groups. One of the attributes that can put you into a group membership is the fact that you've enrolled and are using two-step verification. So we have a scenario where it could be set up when new employees, new staff, new professors or instructors start, they start off with just Gmail only so that they can be onboarded, communicate with HR, but they don't have any access to institution information in Google Drive, student information, don't have access to Google Classroom, Google Calendar, Google Contacts. Once they fulfill that requirement of enabling their two-step verification to their cell phone or otherwise, they're immediately in that dynamic group. And by default, that dynamic group unlocks or provides the other core services in Google. And now they have access to that. So being able to tell that insurance institution that you have sort of a bulletproof, hard and fast way to ensure institution information isn't accessible until someone meets that second layer security requirement. Really great creative use of some of these features. The dashboard, the investigation tool, like we mentioned, being able to see across your organization, across your environment, your domain, all those security pieces, set alerts, like Carly said, to proactively be notified, to proactively possibly take action to snuff out those emails or make changes to those Google Drive files, given criteria with those activity rules is a great thing. We can pump all the information to a Google BigQuery instance in GCP if we want to longitudinally keep this data over time or more than the 6 months that Google gives us in the reporting section. We could keep it year over year and look at adoption and look at other security data over longer periods of time with that BigQuery export. And then on the data ownership side, of course, whether it's fundamentals or these paid versions, you own your data. Google does not look at it or touch it unless you call support and ask them to. Your institution's Google environment, albeit the same Gmail and tools that consumers use in the rest of the world, it is siloed off for education, and that's part of the educational support and privacy agreement. You can remove your data or even export your data out of Google's system at any time as a super administrator. So all those functionalities are there for sure. Next slide, please.
All
I think it's
right.
back to you, Carl. I did my
All
job,
right,
hopefully.
Thank you. That was fantastic. Everybody did a great job. We had a lot of panelists today. I want to read the last poll question: identify online campus collaboration productivity tools. How is it transforming teaching, learning at your institution, or what's the most important? And overwhelmingly, everyone said access to content and the ability to submit content anytime or access it. Also, high up there, 85%, communicate effectively. Also high up there, 85% empower faculty, 77% engage students. So these are the primary drivers of how collaboration and productivity tools can really make an impact on institutions. Tom, as you said, I think you're right. It's 100% of institutions have to really get involved with this. We talked about the student demographic changing and how important it is. The other thing I wanted to kind of just briefly touch on that you said, Tom, and this is, I talked to many schools across the country, in and out of the country, actually, about their needs in terms of technology. You covered identity and access management. You covered email. You covered also multi-factor authentication. These are all individual systems that are often acquired by institutions from vendors. And it may be more appropriate for them to do so, but some institutions can really find an economy of scale through a Google solution, I believe. And I think also speaking to the ubiquity of Google and it being so popular, and everyone has that personal account, transitioning to an academic environment is not that far-fetched. So I would think that for some schools this would be a good exponentially valuable solution. All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for attending. I really appreciate our attendees. Great retention. Everybody hung in there for our entire hour almost. Thank you. I hope that you were able to get something out of this. We will send you the video of this presentation, as well as all the unanswered Q&As. But I think our panelists did a good job in responding to those questions. I want to thank all our attendees for being here today, because I know it's the start of school for many of you, and so you're very, very busy. I know Meredith and Walt took their time out to join us today, and I appreciate that. Carly and Tom, thank you for being with us. It was great information. We'll get this out to everybody, and we'll do a follow-up afterwards. Any questions or any contacts that our audience wants to have, happy to connect you with any of our panelists today, or talk about Campus Consortium services that may be of use to your institution. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.